Hi everyone, welcome to week 6. I can't believe we're at the last week of this class. It went by so quickly. What I decided I needed to do today was really review the exam with everyone. One of the things that you're going to notice with your grade is I didn't exactly grade on a curve, but what I did was I looked at sort of the range of scores on the exam. It was a difficult exam. There were scores that were A's, ranging all the way down to F's, but I decided to add 8 points to everyone's score. That gave the highest scoring exam 100, and it added 8 points to everybody's score. I did that because my goal in giving an exam really isn't to hurt anyone's grade. It's really to have you make sure that you're used to taking exams. Many of you are going to be taking the Massachusetts teacher test. And while I know that taking exams is difficult for many of you, it really is good to have practice. So again, all of you had 8 points added to your score. For some of you, it made a very big difference to your score. So I'm going to go over the exam right now. So question 1, which of the following activities is most likely to be found in a functional curriculum for a student with moderate mental retardation? And I actually sort of regret the wording of this because typically we refer to that as an intellectual disability, now not mental retardation. And the correct answer to that is learning the proper procedure for shopping and buying groceries. So that is functional. Something that lends itself to a real world experience is often referred to as functional. Question 2, explicit instruction contains all the following instructional choices except self-discovery, because explicit instruction really has to do with taking a particular task and having a student learn to do that. So it is not about that sort of student self-discovery of what it is that they want to learn. It's very specific. Question 3, the problem with developing a clear definition of emotional and behavioral disorders is that, and the answer to that is all of the above, is that all children behave inappropriately at times. That's developmental. Kids are not perfect all the time. There is no clear argument about what constitutes good mental health. There's not a universal description. And there are norms across different cultures that really tell us what we consider to be appropriate or not appropriate. Question 4, most individuals with autism have uneven skill development, and I think almost everybody got that correct. 5, which has been suggested as the cause of increasing prevalence of autism, and I believe everybody got this correct as well too, and the answer to that was all of the above. That there is an increased awareness, that there is actually an increase in autism, and that there has been increased advocacy for autism. Which is an example of a student who has trouble generalizing with generalization of learning? And the answer to that is Billy can tie his sneakers but not his dress shoes. So generalization has to do with taking a skill and then moving it out into the real world. What best describes a functional skill? The answer to this was Chris can independently prepare a complete meal. And again, go back to functional life skills, things that happen in the real world. What type of instruction is most effective for teaching students with disabilities? So this was a difficult one because the answer for this was explicit instruction. And when we're talking about students with disabilities, a lot of the time we talk about task analysis and breaking things down. While the other kinds of instruction, self-directed, implicit, and interactive instruction, are all good methods of instruction, what we talk about with specialized instruction typically is that explicit, specific instruction. If students were able to obtain the information the same way as every other student, they may have a disability, but they wouldn't qualify for special ed because they wouldn't need that specialized instruction. A functional analysis identifies the potential functions of a student behavior. Some of you got this incorrect. You had verify the function of a student's behavior. Typically, a functional analysis is when you're not sure why a student is doing what they're doing. So you're trying to figure out the function of their behavior. I believe that for the most part, everyone got the autism question correct. Autism is best described as a developmental disability. Question 11, emotional or behavioral disorders can be divided into 3 groups that are characterized by And the answer to this is externalizing behaviors, internalizing behaviors, and low incidence behaviors. And I'm not going to go into detailed explanation. That is in your book, but if you're confused by this, be in touch and I will happily explain it to you. Question 12, in general, all behaviors occur to either obtain positive reinforcement or avoid negative reinforcement, except the following. And that the answer to that is consequences, because consequences isn't the thing that you're trying to obtain. You're trying to obtain attention. You're trying to get to a particular activity or task, or you're trying to meet a sensory need. So it was just, it just doesn't fit. Question 13, students with more severe intellectual disabilities represent, and that's only 1% of the population. Very, very small amount. Which of the following may not be an example of a student with a difficulty with adaptive skills? And that is, adaptive skills are those functional life skills. So looking both ways to cross the street, providing an incorrect amount of money, providing a social security number, all those functional kinds of adaptive skills. Eye contact is not considered an adaptive skill. And actually, just as a little side note, that could actually be cultural as well too. If any of you have had any Asian or Southeast Asian students, culturally, many of them are taught not to make eye contact, that it's disrespectful. Question 15, students with severe multiple disabilities display all of the following characteristics except, and that would be the stuttering or disfluency, and that tends to not be part of a multiple severe disabilities. That tends to be part of a very specific language disability, and there is not necessarily any comorbidity. It doesn't necessarily occur with anything else. A student who has stuttering or disfluency, it would depend to the extent to which they had that stuttering or disfluency, as if it actually comes up as a disability and it requires specialized instruction. Students who experience a combination of hearing and visual loss often present with, and the answer was all of the above, problems with communication, mobility, and isolation. Which the following is not an example of a cause for a traumatic brain injury. The answer is stroke, because a concussion, shaken baby syndrome, and head injury are all examples of traumatic brain injury. Augmentative and alternative communication devices replace or supplement spoken communication and are a documented proven practice. And actually, I'll just add to that in addition to a proven practice, augmentative alternative communication does not, it's been shown not to prevent development of language. It actually supports it. The federal law with regard to gifted and talented students, and I think almost everybody got this wrong, surprisingly. Just to be really clear, the law requires that talented and gifted students are identified, but there is no federal funding to provide services or any federal requirement to provide services to children who are talented and gifted. All it requires is identification. And I think over the years, over probably the past couple decades, I have noticed a decline in talented and gifted programs because there are only a finite amount of resources in school districts, for the most part, do seem not to be putting any resources into talented and gifted education. And then finally, question 20, culturally and linguistically diverse students have higher dropout rates, are underrepresented in gifted programs, and are over-identified for disabilities. And this was one of the things we discussed in our very first discussion of this class, was with regard to disproportionate identification. And I think all of you did a great job with the short answer question, the short essay question, question 21. So I hope that was helpful. That was sort of the speed version of doing that for you. Very quickly, for our last week, we are going to talk about physical and health impairments. You should be working on your final project, and the week 6 discussion, make sure that you post early and often, that you get your research project into me by the end of the class. And I just want to let all of you know that it has been my pleasure to be learning with all of you this week. This has been, this session, this has been a really unusual time, and I appreciate all the efforts all of you have taken to get your work in, and I know that many of you have children at home or jobs, and you're just working very hard. So sorry this recording is so long, but I thought this is all information that you should have, and I really wanted to let you know how much I've appreciated each and every one of you, and I wish all of you the best, and maybe I'll see you in another course. It's been a great 6 weeks. Bye-bye.